Hey there everyone, my name's Aaron. Today I wanted to bring to you guys a quick video. I guess you could say one of my passions really is Linux in the open source community. And so one of the things I wanted to do is just try to give a quick intro to what Linux is, how it can help you possibly in your life, or make your life better. And so today I'm going to talk about how to try out Linux, what I use, and then I'm also going to talk about some open source projects that I really love and how to find more and keep up to date with things. So first thing I want to do is I want to start off with how do I try out Linux? Or first, what is Linux? Linux is a operating system. It is like Windows over here. I mean, you see you got like all of your applications installed on it. Windows, what it does is your applications sit on top of Windows, and so your applications talk to Windows, and it's like, hey, I need to run this command, and then Windows tells the CPU. So it's kind of like the middleman. It helps schedule things, and it helps your programs to run. Different operating systems have different schedulers, or they could have the same one, depends on what code they're written. Apple probably has a different one, because Apple is based off of Linux. The web is also based off of Linux. There's a lot of Linux servers. It's used a lot of times, and so it's just a good thing to know. It can also give you a better appreciation and can help you understand a bit more technically what's going on, which can help you when you're communicating with others in today's world where it's so technical. First thing that we want to do is we're going to go ahead and download Virtualbox. If you're trying it out, Virtualbox is again open source project. It's hosted by Oracle, the company, same people that do Java. And so you'll download this, and this will allow you to run like mini machines, or they're technically called virtual machines. It allows you to run a computer inside of your computer. If you're doing this on Windows 11 like I am, you'll just go ahead and download the Windows host package, and you'll go ahead and run that installer. I've already installed it, so I won't be doing that. Second thing that you need to do before you do this is go to this website, getfedora.org, which, by the way, all of the sites I talk about today and all the projects, I will have a link to them in the description. You're going to want to go to getfedora.org, and you're going to want to download this Fedora Workstation. Now, I will say, before we jump into this any further, Fedora is just one of many Linux distros. It's important to understand that most of the Linux distros are essentially the same, and they're built off of different things. Fedora is maintained by a company called Red Hat Linux. They do a lot of enterprise stuff, but this is more their workstation side. Please keep in mind as well, this is all free. There are a whole bunch of different kinds of distros. I will talk more about that later, though, whenever we get to the open source part. For now, you'll go ahead and you'll click download, and it'll be a .iso file. Or, if you know how to torrent, you can use torrents here. So you'll go ahead, you'll download those two things. Once you have that downloaded, you'll go ahead and you'll open Virtualbox. I've already made a Fedora, but I'll walk you guys through it as well. So we're going to go ahead and you're going to click New. We'll go ahead and name it whatever it is, Fedora. I a lot of times will have multiple VMs. One will be for code development, and another one will be for my hacking practices, and another one might be something that I'm trying to hack. You can do a lot with virtual machines. You can network them together to where they're their own separate thing and they can't be accessed by anyone but that other virtual machine. A lot of stuff you can do. For now, I am going to need a hacking one, so I'll just call this hacking, or pen testing. It's technically pen, but so you'll type it'll auto-populate Linux and Fedora if you type Fedora. It's smart. You'll go ahead and dedicate the amount of RAM. I never go above half of my RAM because you need to still give your host operating system RAM for it to run it. I have 16 gigs, which translate to 16,384 megabytes. So 1,892 megabytes is 8 gigs of RAM. Because you can see 1,024 megabytes is 1 gig of RAM. So you go ahead and you do that. You'll create a virtual hard disk. Here it will tell you what kind you want. This is fine. You can do whichever one you want. You'll click next. I typically do dynamically allocated. All that means is that it won't use up that space until it needs it. Go ahead and click next. You'll choose where you want to keep that file and how much space you want to give it. I'm not going to create this because I already have one created. And then once you do that, you should pop right into here. Now, we're going to go down to storage before we start it up. You'll click optical drive, choose / create a disk image, add. Then you're going to go wherever you downloaded it. You're going to open it. And then you'll choose it. This ISO is what you would boot from. So it's important to keep in mind this is what you're going to boot from. And if you are wanting to use this as your daily driver operating system, which I highly recommend, this is what I use for my laptop that I take with me everywhere. It can even replace your desktop if you want. I just play games with my dad that require Windows, so I can't switch this yet because I really like playing with my dad. But yeah, so you'll pop this in. I was going to say you'll flash this to a flash drive, and I can talk about resources on how to figure out how to do that soon, later. So you'll go ahead and you'll click start. Now is the point in time in which you might get an error, fail to open the session for the virtual machine Fedora, not a hypervisor partition, and AMDV is disabled in the BIOS. So what's happening here is that there's no hypervisor and AMDV is disabled. 2 steps on how you're going to do this. First off, you're going to press Windows key. You're going to look for features. You have to do both of these. And you're going to look for, type Windows features and then turn Windows features on and off. You're going to go down Windows Hypervisor Platform. You're going to click OK. It's going to apply the changes for a second, and then it's going to ask you to restart. I won't be able to show this, but I am also going to restart my machine. Once I restart my machine, I'm going to click the button that will get me into the BIOS. If you don't know how to do that, that's okay. For me, it's delete. You can Google it for your manufacturer. Say you have an MSI board, you want to ask what button you need to press for your MSI motherboard. Or if you have an Alienware laptop, then you can search that. So you'll restart. You'll go into your BIOS. You're going to look for something called Hyper-V or AMDV. You'll go ahead and, or just virtualization. Sometimes they label it just virtualization. You want to make sure that's turned on, save it, apply it, and then we're going to come back in a second. We're going to keep going. While I'm restarting, I just want to take a quick second to mention what I did. I'll mention it again in a second, but basically that item that you see highlighted, I took this picture from my phone. That is what I went ahead and enabled. It wasn't enabled before, but I went ahead and enabled it, and that is the ability to virtualize, at least on my MSI motherboard. I also want to take just a quick second to mention that if you have any questions about open source software or Linux in general, please don't hesitate to leave it in the comments. Or if you're a part of our Christian Minecraft server, I am already in there, so feel free to DM me, and I would be more than willing to help you, to get on a call with you and help you install Linux or anything of that sort. Linux is something that I have a great passion for. I think a lot of people should try it. I think it teaches you a lot about computers and helps you to be more efficient whenever you're around computers, and it helps you understand why things happen and helps you communicate with others that might be in the tech field a bit more. So, off my quick soapbox, and now onto my longer soapbox. And we're back. So, went ahead, added the Hyper-V, it rebooted, went into the BIOS, enabled virtualization, looked up a YouTube video on how to do it. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to click start and we're going to see if this runs. Which, if you see this screen, that's already a good start. So you're going to go ahead and click capture. We obviously want it to start the Fedora. I have messed up the creation of this. It looks like that's right. So if you do not have virtualization enabled, you need to make sure that you change it from 32 to 64-bit. Super simple change. You just do the change that I did right there. You just click that button and you do that. So the one that's highlighted in white is is what it's selected on. We're going to click start. Click right control to uncapture your mouse, then you can edit things with it. I don't need to see this anymore. You might need to see it a bit more. Sorry for my numlock going weird. This is kind of what happens whenever you run a virtual machine, is that you click into a machine that might not have the exact same settings as you. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to let this boot. It's going to take a bit. It's important to keep in mind that Linux is much lighter than Windows is. There are things that you can do to it, though, that might make it a bit heavier. For example, having they're called desktop environments is how you interact with it. And what's cool about Linux is that it's very simple to just switch to a different desktop environment. For example, on my laptop, Fedora comes with GNOME, and that's what you're going to see, or GNOME. Now, with one install command, you can switch that from being, you can install another desktop environment, and then just at your login screen, you can switch which one it logs into. Ends up being really cool, and really highly end up recommending Cinnamon. Cinnamon is very close to a traditional, I guess you could say, like Windows-like experience, but it's very pretty. I'm gonna uncapture my mouse real quick. And I was gonna say, sometimes you might need to add more video memory, or you can see at the bottom what's going on. So execution cap is 100 on something. Recording is disabled. Video memory 16. You see that there's no stuff enabled. We might go ahead and give it a couple more cores. Again, whenever it comes to running a virtual machine, do not go over half. A lot of things do like to have at a minimum 2 cores. We'll set the execution cap We'll leave the execution cap at 90. The IO API-C feature is not currently allowed. I don't feel like turning that on right now, so we'll just see how that works. We'll let it test the media and then install. So what testing the media does is it just makes sure that there's no issues with what it's going to install from. I highly recommend this if you don't know how to use the checksum system. Checksum system is really interesting. It's all about basically there's an algorithm that can convert what's in a file to one string of numbers and letters, and it can be in long. It depends on the algorithm, but basically, as long as nothing in that file changes, that hash will always be the same. So what developers will do is that they will create a hash. They'll finish the package that they're working on, the product, create a hash of it, and they'll upload it. So we can see it's a pass. It's okay to use this media. That's great. So we're going to go ahead and use it. But yeah, what happens then is that they'll post it, and then you download the file. The hash will be something that you can just copy and paste, and you just check it and see how it goes. It looks like adding an extra core really did it. Sometimes there are distros that are not meant for very low spec systems. Fedora might have just needed to test it first. I don't necessarily know why, but you can see all the things starting up. Once we get in here, I'll show you guys why I like it so much. And we'll go through the install process, and I'll talk about it a bit more. Now's a good time to talk about distros, probably. So there are a whole bunch of different kinds of distributions. There is, take for example, Ubuntu is probably the most widely known. And here we go. So this is what we're greeted with. So we're going to go here. You're currently running Fedora on Live Media. You can install Fedora now or choose install hard drive in the activities overview at any later time. So what is this saying? Basically, one of the ways that you can use these ISOs is that you can flash it to a flash drive and plug it into your machine. If you want to just check to see how it runs, how it works base out of the box, and you want to try it on your bare metal, that's why Try Fedora is there. You leave the flash drive plugged in and you can just mess around on it. Because this is a virtual machine and there is a hard drive that we created before associated to it, we're going to do install the hard drive. Awesome. And it automatically detected that we wanted to do that. So it's going to pull up the installer, which is right here. So you're just going to go ahead and you're going to go through and you're going to install it. They do a very good job of trying to make sure that it's easy, but gives you all the things that you want. So we want to select this disk. You can do automatic, custom, advanced, custom. I just do automatic, honestly. Once you've selected that and there's that green check mark, you can go into done and it'll take you back out. It's going to check, make sure it has an idea. We'll change our time zone because we're not in that time zone. We'll click begin installation. So it's doing all this automatically. While this is installing, I do want to bring up Ubuntu. Ubuntu, if you're trying to just very easily get into it, this is like the one that a lot of people start on. This is where I started back in 2008. 8 a long time ago. There's that. A lot of people like Linux Mint. Linux Mint is good in the fact that it has this desktop environment that I was telling you guys about that's very close to it, but anything that you find on an Ubuntu forum will work here. As you can see, it says everything just works out of the box, very simple to use. They have a focus on free and open source hardware, which is great, software. I highly recommend Linux Mint. If you are looking for something more that you could stick with for years and that can be stupidly simple or extremely complex, depending on how much you want to dive into it, that's why I love Fedora. I enjoy messing with my system every now and then, but with Fedora, it doesn't really matter, because if I want it to just work, it will, and if I want to go in and tweak stuff at a later date, I can, and it gives me that freedom. Same thing with Linux Mint. I do not recommend Arch or any Arch-based distribution. Arch is rolling distro, and Arch is known for getting updates out really fast, which is fair. It's understandable. It's nice because you have the latest updates and it's just right there. There are a lot of there's a lot of community support around it as well, but it's not beginner friendly. It's very easy to mess something up, and it's just not something that I would recommend, especially for a beginner. Not Manjaro either. If you're interested in learning more about how Linux distros work, there is also a Linus Tech Tips series where they tried switching to Linux for 30 days. They did not recommend it. I do recommend it. One of the things that you have to keep in mind, though, is that you're changing your toolkit. For example, I would not go into this expecting to be able to use Microsoft Office 365. You can use the online versions, of course. You can install the web app versions. And if you wanted to, there is a way to get the actual software on there. But that's, to me, that's where the open source community comes in. Instead, we use like Libreoffice or OpenOffice. Those are applications that they do the same thing as Microsoft Office. They are word editors, they are presentation editors, stuff like that. They even work on, you can save things as a docx, like Microsoft Word. It's just a different application. I highly recommend those. I even use those actually on my Windows machine. You can see here I have Libreoffice Writer installed, so I'll pull this up really quickly while this is installing. And you see here they shows tips on startup, which is kind of nice, but you can have it lay out and look pretty much exactly, pretty similar to a Microsoft Office feel with the tabbed layout and everything. You got all your fonts, and you can just like, hey, this is things. Like, and the great part about it is that this isn't going to break. They're not going to force you to update this. You update it whenever you want. And on Linux, it's even easier to do if you don't want to risk it. You don't ever have to update. If you want to install new software and stuff, you can update whenever you feel like you want to, but it really gives you that freedom. But this is what I use on my home computer. It's great. It just works. I have all the form control stuff, can do all the file options. It is my favorite word processor, is Libreoffice Writer. So that's a free one for you. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna skip ahead to whenever we get to the next step of this installation. Just remember, if you were installing this, not in a virtual machine, you could take longer, it could take less time, or it could take more time. Installations sometimes can take time. But yeah, we'll see you in a second. So, we've just come back now, and as you can see, the installation's finished. So we're going to go ahead and finish, and we should be okay to power off. You'll go ahead, you'll power off. It's going to stop all these things and should close the window once it's powered off. If not, you can just close it yourself. Once we close it, which is still shutting down. It takes it a second sometimes. There it goes. So it's going to stop and close all these systems. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of people don't know just how much it takes to do an operating system, and this really shows you. So we're going to remove this disk from the virtual drive now because we don't need it. What we just did was installing it on that system, on that hard drive. So now it's going to boot just like it would if you installed it on your machine. This is why virtual machines are so great, honestly. You can install different operating systems here, and with installing different operating systems, you can do different things. You can, like, I have my Windows one because I have to play with my dad and stuff, but if I'm more comfortable in Linux, I can hop into Linux and do whatever I need to do. I use virtual machines as well because there are lab environments that I can connect to do cybersecurity training. Whenever I go do those cybersecurity trainings, I will always connect through a virtual machine because it is its own separate system, separate from my machine. It's what we call sandboxed, essentially. It's using the same network and stuff, so it's not necessarily like a perfect catch-all solution, but that, coupled with how easy it is to install packages, means that I can use it to essentially do what I need to do. Gives you a bit more control over what you need. While this is booting up, as I said, it's a virtual machine. It's going to take some time. I just want to really quickly talk over some open source software that I really enjoy. I'll start with Kdenlive, what I'm going to be using to edit this video together. Kdenlive, free and open source video editing software. What open source means is that I can go and I can look at the source code for Kdenlive. There's a community around it. See, you can contribute with development. You can go see, here's just the code, and you can see it. You can report bugs. You can do stuff like that. It really is quite cool, all the stuff you can do. Some more open source things. I'll talk about Mumble real quick. Mumble is an open source, low latency voice chat system. You can see it right here. It's not going to connect. It's going to try to, but it's not going to be able to because I'm not hosting that server because no one would use it with me. Basically allowed you to connect with other players in different chat rooms, and you could play games together and talk. Another one that I want to talk about, which is something that I highly recommend and something that might be interesting to switch to, is not the Matrix, but Matrix Open. We'll just search open source, and that should find it. Matrix.org. What's so cool about Matrix is that you can... Matrix is decentralized, which means no one can really moderate it. Like, decentralized meaning if, say, let's take Discord, for example. If Discord went out of business and its servers shut down, like, you couldn't use the application. Matrix doesn't host any servers. They well, they do. It's something that they offer, but you can host your own. And so if Matrix ever, for some reason, stopped hosting their servers, it's not the end of the world because you can still use the service. You use this in conjunction with Element, which is essentially the front end part to it. So you would install, end users would install Element. You connect to a Matrix server that someone spins up, and then it's basically Discord. You can use it for enterprise, you can use it for community. It honestly is really cool, and it's completely free. It's going to give you the best quality because they're not trying to make any money off of it. It really is great. Okay, so we went ahead and this has started up. I highly recommend going through this tour, but as I already know a fair bit about Linux, we're not going to do that. Maybe we are. You want to enable third-party repositories. That's big. If you have these and you want to sync them, you can. You don't have to. One of the cool things is that if you sync Google, you can get your email on your desktop, and you can also directly access your Google Drive through the file system. You'll enter your username. It'll automatically make one for you. You could check all these different ones. I typically go with A. Thompson. So you'll set a password. So you set one. Start using Fedora Linux, and it's going to start up. So once it takes it a second, basically it hasn't created a user or anything. And so right now it's doing that, and then once it does that, you'll be able to join and use the desktop. One of the things we're going to do is no thank you. View auto resize guest display. There you go. If you click that, it'll auto resize to your window, and then you can full screen it if you want. But here's kind of what it would look like. So this is kind of like your main desktop, and if I was to pull up an application like Firefox, it's gonna spin for a minute because virtual machine, but then it's gonna go ahead and it's gonna pop up. That, like, this is a working computer now. You can use this to get work done. A lot of times developers will use this because utilizing packages on Windows doesn't really work right now. I think I loaded probably the most hungry app. I loaded a web browser, and those can be pretty hungry sometimes. There we go. So you can see it goes ahead and starts up. It's a bit laggy because virtual machine, but you can see it's the same thing as a normal operating system. It's like your Windows. The only difference is that there's a community around it. There are people that care deeply about the operating system for this. So you're going to get updates. You're not going to worry. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to worry about Microsoft tracking you or anything. Privacy, security, big focuses of it. It's also just a lot easier to install applications, which I'll show you in a second. You don't have to be afraid of the terminal command line, but yeah, that's fine. I don't have enough. I haven't given you enough resources for this. And you're in a virtual machine, it just, yeah. So in GNOME, you press your super key or your Windows key to get here, and then you can press this, and it takes you, and you can see all of them, all of your apps, and you can click type to search here. Boxes is actually their own virtual machine system application, so you don't have to worry about that at all. This store icon right here is their software center, and you can go here and you can look up apps, or you can go to the terminal. You can go to the terminal and do, for example, sudo dnf install. Oh, what's something? I really like NeoFetch. It's simple. It's easy. And then I'll do tac y just to say yes, I accept. Yeah, basically, sudo is like, hey, I want to be an admin whenever I do this. This requires admin privileges. So you type in your sudo password, and then you type in your password, and then it's going to go ahead. What all these are is they're called repositories. These are servers in which that application lives in. And what you do is that you do sudo dnf install neofetch. It's going to say, okay, does any of my repositories have that? And it's quite possible they don't, but it's possible that they do too. You'll be able to learn this by going through and being like, hey, how do I install neofetch? They'll say, oh, you just do this. It's in your normal repositories, or you might have to add a third-party repository. Like I have one that I can install things that are Microsoft related, stuff like that. It does end up being very simple. There's also universal packaging systems like Flatpaks and Snaps, which gets a lot of how do you say it? Gets a lot of hate, but it's still something that you can use and be totally fine with. The Software Center is also a really good place if you're just starting out, and you can install apps from there as well. Yeah, you'll see it's gonna check, make sure everything's okay, and then it'll finish installing it. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had for you guys today. That was the main thing I wanted to show you guys, this open source resources. If you guys are interested in this is something I really love. I would love to do more videos on, maybe you guys want to see how to set up a desktop. Like, how should I customize my desktop to go from, like this to like, mine is very comfy, it has a nice wallpaper, and changed the fonts and did stuff like that. I'd be more than happy to go through that. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.